Hi, and welcome to VIBEZ Daily. This is a daily devotional curated by VIBEZ Church to help you practice the way of Jesus and be all that God has called you to be. You have joined us for our year-long series titled Devoted. Acts 2:42 tells us that the followers of Jesus were devoted to the apostles' teaching, to fellowship, to breaking of bread, and to prayer. This podcast was created to provide context and commentary for what you read each day. Just before our friends begin discussing today's reading, we want to invite you not only for fellowship, but for prayer as well. We have created the VIBE Daily Chat group to offer you fellowship and a community where you can state your observations, ask questions about the reading or the podcast. You can join us by downloading the VIBEZ Church app in your favorite app store. Click Join the Conversation and join us today. And finally, we hope that you can join us for prayer. Prayer happens Monday through Friday, and more information on that can be found on the VIBEZ Church app under prayer. Now, let's begin our conversation on today's reading.
Yo, welcome back to the VIBEZ Daily podcast. So excited to have you with us again as we continue our journey through the book of Chronicles. It is day 121, and I'm so excited to be back here again with my wife, Victoria, who is with us as we bring Chronicles to a close this week. So really excited about that. Left off at chapter 17 yesterday, really just with again, God's covenant with David specifically, as David wanted to build him a house. God makes a promise that he is, I'll build you a house. I'm gonna do one better for you. And so we're here in chapter 18 today, as we pick up with kind of some more of David's just like military conquest, some of what he did as a warrior, which I had to say I thought was interesting, particularly after the fact that like the reason David can't build the house is because of his blood essentially on his hands, like that he killed so many people. And they follow that up with, well, David killed some more people. Then he kind of did that. So yeah, we'll jump out to you here in chapter 18 as David kind of starts to go to war.
Yeah, I think for me it was interesting though that like this was his mission, and the Lord knew that this would be his mission. And so the Lord made him prosper in his mission. But the other thing that stuck out to me was this whole, like, David took this large amount of bronze in verse 8. And I love it, as you can tell. He said this author is like hindsight, right? You see his posts, because he's bridging this gap between what David did and what Solomon did, which we're not even at Solomon yet. And so it's like David took this large amount of bronze, and with it, Solomon made the bronze sea and the pillars and the vessel of bronze. So I just love that, we get a little connection of the stories.
Yeah. That's good. It's a good point. I think to that point, what's also interesting is, one of the things that God says about, or promises David, and we'll get to this a little later in this book, is essentially like Solomon's going to have rest.
Yeah.
Right? From his enemies. We pointed this out when we read through First Kings, that like that is part of why Solomon was able to build the temple, was because, remember, it took years, like it took over a decade to do that. And part of how he was able to do that is because they weren't at war. They're at rest. And I feel like you kind of see David preparing that way, right? That like, to your point, this was part of David's like mission, and his purpose was for him to conquer these different lands and these different places so that Solomon would eventually have rest. Right? Like he just kind of lays that foundation. And it's beautiful to me. I think there's some symmetry, even like, I could say from a personal experience, like I know that there are things that people who came before me did to like prepare the way. You know what I mean? In so many different ways. There's obviously just some of it that's more like practical or personal, as like a dominant African American man, right? For instance, like knowing that in this country there were others who kind of came before, so that I could experience certain freedoms and liberties as an American here in this country. But even on a spiritual level, man, like I was sharing my testimony with someone the other day, like I know my parents prayed for me. You know what I'm saying? Like they prayed for me, and they prayed in such a way like that would ultimately draw me back to the Lord in a season in which I had walked away in so many ways. And so like I know that there were others who went through things first, or experienced things, or made things happen, for the sake of ultimately like what I would be able to experience later. And, also think about how we're doing that same thing prayerfully for our kids, and like, what are some of the battles we can fight so they can experience rest, kind of things. So yeah, as I was reading this, knowing that that's ultimately why Solomon was able to build that, it just sticks out to me, all the wars he fought ultimately for his son to have rest.
That's good.
Yeah. Anything else kind of beginning of 18 here, or really kind of through the end there?
Not really.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good. It's a lot of war, a lot of fighting. Like you said, very beautiful picture, kind of seeing again that hindsight is 2020 type of thing here, where we know this is where a lot of this comes from, and we'll see a little bit more of that later too. But then in 19, again, it's kind of another familiar story here. Another time when we talked about it before. David was trying to do a kind thing. It felt like he was trying to do right, and just was misunderstood, or however the Ammonites took it in this particular case. But yeah, I mean, anything that just jumped out to you in this particular version of it in 19, as he ends up in this war with the Arameans and the Ammonites and all of that, just over the fact that he tried to be kind.
Yeah, I think it was interesting, and I don't know if we said this before. Like, I just thought it was interesting that at all that he would pick a fight with David, like, especially if you're not equipped. Like, you gotta do all this hiring of folk, and like, y'all not big and bad, so why y'all? But he also kind of like reminds me of how, since we've already seen it already, how Rehoboam goes to his like friends, his childhood friends, for advice versus the elders. Like, it just seems like he took the advice of some people who weren't that wise, right? But he said that with the princes, which is probably like his brothers or something like that, kind of was just like, nah. And it wasn't good advice. And so, yeah, here they end up in this war. And to me, the other thing that just stuck out, even just in terms of like them going to war and fighting, was it does seem like Joab, as much as like he seems ruthless in certain instances, and he is really just about bloodshed a lot. Like, he's not really, like, he's done people dirty, and you said people close to him or people who trust him, like, that's how he kind of gets over it, because most people they have their shield down because they just don't expect him to be their enemy. But like, as much dirty fighting as he does, it does seem like in certain instances that he really feels like he's fighting for the Lord, right? Like in verse 13, be strong and let us use our strength for our people and for the cities of our God. May the Lord do what seems right to him. And like, you see this a couple of times where he is like writing, like, or saying things like, for the Lord, let's fight for the Lord, let's fight for the Lord, like, let's show them what our Lord can do. And that is interesting, because I don't really often take him as this person who is fearful of the Lord. And then he even sticks up for the Lord when David starts doing stuff like the census. Like, And so there is this part of him that's like, let's do right by the Lord. But then we see instances where like he's wilding.
No, that's good. I know we'll get to that conversation tomorrow, because that was definitely something that jumped out to me in chapter 21. But yeah, it is hard to kind of completely understand who Joab is in a lot of this, right? Because I just seem to be some conflict in like his actions and personality. And again, even some of those things that he did, maybe where he thought was on behalf of the Lord, right? That were, maybe we think was a little shady in that regard, but it's good. I think I was going to point out specifically, because I think you did bring up a good point, is some of the just consulting of, or the advice of these leaders that essentially lead him to go against David. I don't know why I thought it was so interesting though that like, and I didn't think about this the last time we read it, but just that they chose to like embarrass David's people instead of kill them.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know why. Like, it felt so arrogant and like so bold to just like humiliate them and send them back to David.
Yeah.
Rather than just like kill them.
Yeah.
It was almost like a taunt to my mind. Just like, yeah, like I'm not afraid of you, you know? And so I don't know, like as I'm thinking about it this time, I just feel it's so interesting that that's the pathway they chose rather than, you know, like you said, like just even really declaring war through that. Like why even make them mad if you weren't going to actually fight? Like, I don't know. It just seems so unusual to me in that regard. But as you said, like, yeah, he ultimately upsets him and wasn't really ready for that fight. They weren't ready for that smoke at all because, like you said, he had to recruit others. And then I don't know. I love the last verse here because, like, ultimately after all this, there's the Arameans who kind of get in your version said what Syrians, is that the
Syrians
that like get involved here are just so upset that they're just like they will never willing to help the Ammonites again
ever.
Like, I am done with y'all. Okay.
Why y'all bring us out here?
Y'all brought us out here, got our tails whooped by David, all because your petty self didn't want to accept the gift from him in the first place. You brought us out here. We got our tails handed to us.
Exactly.
No, we ain't coming back to help y'all again. Don't call me.
Ever.
Lose my number. Okay. Lose my number. Don't call me. I ain't coming to help y'all no more. And I don't know, that verse that tickled me the first time I read it. It just seemed like he just took their ball and went home. It's like, nope, I'm not playing with y'all no more.
Playing with y'all.
No. We're done.
Yeah. That's real. That's real.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, it says there's a story we've kind of known, and then chapter 20, which is a short chapter, but very interesting because it probably should have been a lot longer chapter than it actually is.
Actually, it wasn't in Samuel.
No, it wasn't. Talk to me about chapter 20. You mentioned a little earlier just kind of how these writers wanted to give them hope and kind of point out what was good. What did you find interesting at the beginning here in chapter 20?
Yeah. It's so funny because it starts out the same exact way as it did in 2 Samuel chapter 11. It was like in the time of spring, Joab goes and fights these Ammonites, the same Ammonites we're talking about in chapter 19. But David remained in Israel, and like your face. But right after that, it goes into like what he was doing when he stayed behind, which was roaming around the top of his roof, looking at Uriah's wife Bathsheba, and all the drama that commenced after that.
Yes.
But it skips. It literally just skips right over that. And it's like David remained in Jerusalem. And Joab struck down Rabbah, overthrew it. David took the crown for the king. I'm like, wait a minute, hold on. How did we just skip to taking the king's crown? Because in the midst of that, you killed Uriah, slept with his wife, impregnated her, took her as a wife. Between those two sentences, there was so much that got left out in 2 Samuel chapter 11.
Yeah, no, let's go. It's not just 11. We got 11. We got 12.
Yep, 13.
So
we have Amnon, Tamar, and Absalom. That whole thing.
Yeah. But I'm just calling out that, like you said, just even that particular, like that's 11 and 12 because the capture of the city of Rabbah, like where Joab fights against Rabbah, is 12 verse 26, right? And that's where, he took the crown from the head, is verse 30, placed it on his head. The crown weighs 75 pounds. That's in chapter 12. Like literally, as you said, it's literally like
a whole chapter later.
Beginning of 11, the first couple verses in 11, like verse 1 of chapter 11. And then it control all cut
Delete.
And we're gonna pick up at chapter 12, verse 26. Like, it was like the authors read it. It was like, oh no, we can't
No.
we can't have that in this book. Like, literally, there is an entire, like, 2 chapters worth from 11 verse 2. Because literally, verse 2 is in 2 Samuel is where he got up out of his bed and strode around the roof, right? He said, so we cut that out. So verse 1, we're gonna read, we're gonna keep that, and we're gonna pick up at chapter 12, verse 26.
Yeah.
I was just like,
Yeah.
wait, what?
Wait, what happened?
We get all of 3 verses in First Chronicles.
Interesting.
We leave out all the rest of that.
Interesting. We forgot all about that.
Leave it all out.
Yeah.
I thought this was comedy.
It cracked me up.
I was like, yeah, these authors, like, he was a good guy.
David,
He was a good guy.
let's get back to the winning.
Good guy. He won that war. Like, it should be clear. Let's just point out he did win that battle. Okay? He did win. I feel like you guys are getting lost in the details.
You're focusing on all the wrong things.
Yeah, you're lost in the details. He won.
Oh.
He went to war in the spring, and he came back a winner.
Yeah.
What matters?
Even
Who
though-
cares what happens in between all that? Okay, that's irrelevant.
It's too much for me. Then David and all the people returned to Israel. I
was.
Is this before or after the birth of Solomon? Like, come on, somebody, help me out here.
It was.
Yeah.
It was so funny to me as I read it. I was like, 3 verses. We get 3 verses. We had 2 chapters in 2 Samuel. I appreciate whoever wrote 2 Samuel was like, nah, we're gonna tell the whole story.
Yeah. No,
It's
for
all
real.
important.
I mean, because like you said, because even when we get to this whole, like, the Philistine giants killed and the census and all that, in between that, we have chapter 13.
Yep.
Amnon, Tamar,
Yeah.
and Absalom.
Mm-hmm.
That whole
Which is a mess. Yeah.
situation was a mess.
Yeah.
Chapter 15, when Absalom is trying to take over,
Mm-hmm.
and now he has David on the run.
Yep.
That's not there, and now he's embarrassing him with the concubines and all that on the rooftop and all that stuff, and then David comes back, and then we have this rebellion of this guy named Sheba, right, that goes and runs into the next city, and Joab runs after him because he's trying to turn all Israel against David. Like, all this drama.
Yeah.
But no, we're going to just fast forward.
Yeah. Let's leave that out.
We're going to fast forward to him killing some more giants.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And we had a little bit of conversation in church where we're just like, sometimes we probably should focus on the good and just remember that. And remember it fondly, right? But I think it's interesting. I'm gonna throw a conspiracy out there.
Okay.
I love to put my tinfoil hat on and start a conspiracy.
Tinfoil.
Conspiracy. There's aliens out there. I wonder, again, we know that Judah is ruled by, like, David's lineage kind of here. It'd be interesting if, like, over the years they just, like, scrub that part out of their thing. And by the time the author of Chronicles comes around to find the story and starts to write it down, that part's just removed. That part just wasn't there. And they, like, find the scrolls of Samuel later or something. Like, they find his stuff later, like, oh, wait, what? This been here the whole time?
That's funny.
Well, it's like, over the years, the king was like, nah, this don't speak good of Grandpappy. Like, this not good. We're gonna take this part out. David was like, nah, we're gonna redact it. No, that'd be hilarious though. It's my conspiracy. I don't know.
I don't know. Matthew found it.
Matthew did find it. He wasn't letting it go.
Matthew was like, Bathsheba, Uriah the Hittite's wife.
Yeah.
He was not playing in that genealogy.
He was not. They have not let it go.
Yeah.
So
Either they scrubbed it or they wasn't looking for it.
Yeah, so one of the two. But I didn't think that was funny.
That's hilarious.
Speaking of the Philistines or the giants that you talked about, like they do go over those again, and just remind us that there were kind of some additional. He had some family members, descendants, specifically a brother as well, that ultimately are killed. And as he said, man, chapter 20 really just kind of focuses on David's conquest and just like how. Again, just continued battles pretty much from 18 through 20. All of what we've talked about have just been these battles that David has won.
Yeah,
that's been the focus.
Yeah,
more than anything else, despite the fact there's a lot of the story missing. That has been the particular focus for this author.
Yeah.
Anything else jump out to you here in 20 come before we bring our day to a conclusion?
Yeah, as I was reading about these giants, I was like, what a difference like it is when they go up against giants now versus when they went up against a giant back when David was a boy, right? Like I feel like David gave them this like confidence, right? Like, oh yeah, we've seen these giants before, we can handle them. To the fact that like his nephew in verse 7 and 8 like goes up and just destroys one of these giants himself, right? That like he gives him this confidence of like, with the Lord, there's nothing to be afraid of. And so I do love that like it's just a story now. Like it's not a big huge tale to tell. Like it's just in the middle of these scriptures we killed some more giants, and there's no standoff, there's no 40 days of talking. There's like there's not this big fear driven or who's gonna fight this giant, and it's just like oh, we saw a giant, we killed him. And I love it. Like I love where they have come from and the faith they have in the Lord. And also like you said that like Goliath had brothers. And have you heard of like, I think it's Dr. Tony Evans who says that like they think that like he got 5 stones because he knew he had brothers and he was gonna take them all out. Like, it wasn't that he was gonna miss and he would try it again. And he was just like, no, it was because he was gonna take like the whole brotherhood out. Like, like I got one for each of y'all. So
they eventually got him. They got him. They all ran away that day, but they came back at some point and they took him out.
Exactly.
It's good. Okay, well, that brings us to the end of our reading today. Our not as many chapters this week, pretty much like 3 per day, so conversations won't be quite as lengthy perhaps, but that does bring us to the end of today's reading in chapter 20. We'll pick up at 21 tomorrow. But yeah, hope this has been helpful and encouraging. Encourage you to go back and read 2 Samuel yourself as well, and kind of figure out what's different. Pointed out, started at chapter 11. If you want to get the details, if you are just starting with us, I definitely encourage you go back and figure out what was actually happening that spring, while the kings were usually at war and David was not. Very juicy. If you like drama, if you want all the tea, definitely go back and read it. But appreciate you guys joining us this week. Look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow as we pick up at chapter 21. But until then, take care.
Thank you for joining us for the VIBEZ Daily podcast. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, or download our favorite, the VIBEZ Church app. Visit vibes.church/devoted for additional episodes, notes, details, and the latest merch. Join us next time as we continue our journey through the Bible. Take good care.